Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a genuinely extraordinary true story about a woman named Grace. And let me tell you, her journey is going to challenge absolutely everything you think you know about love, crime, and second chances. This is one of those narratives that really forces us to look past our own biases and examine what it actually means to be a prisoner, both literally and figuratively.
So let's just kick things off with a pretty wild question, which sits right at the heart of today's Explainer. Could you fall in love with a man in a cage? I mean, it sounds completely crazy to most of us, right? How in the world can you fall for someone you've never even met in person, someone who's locked away behind concrete and steel? Well, to figure out how this happens, we have to look at where Grace's story actually began.
Before we can really understand her massive leap of faith to message an inmate, we have to understand Grace's profound loneliness. At 28, she lived this incredibly quiet life. She worked in a bookstore because, as she put it, books felt safe. They don't hurt you. But books also can't hug you or hold your hand. She was coming home to eat dinner in silence, washing the dishes all by herself, and looking out her window at couples holding hands on the street. Her heart felt like a heavy stone. In a way, she was trapped in her own kind of prison, a prison of total isolation.
Section 1. Letters Through the Glass. Finding connection in unlikely places. So, deciding she had to change her situation, Grace takes this massive risk and joins a prison pen pal website. And right there, amidst all these photos of angry, scary-looking guys, she found Mark. He didn't look angry at all. He just looked kind of sad, with these really kind eyes. His bio simply said he liked to read, draw, and just wanted someone kind to talk to. She writes to him and then waits 2 agonizing weeks before finally getting a neat, clean letter back. And get this, instead of talking about himself, he wrote, "Your letter was like a ray of sunshine. Tell me about the books you love. Tell me about your life." He showed this gentle, genuine curiosity about her day that Grace had quite literally never experienced with men in her own city. Even from a cage, he actually listened to her.
Now, as their letters went from 1 to 2 to 3 a week, this stark contrast really started to emerge. On one hand, you've got society's harsh assumption of what an inmate is, right? A dangerous criminal or just a guy looking to use a lonely woman. But Grace's actual lived experience with Mark was completely different. He worked in the prison library. He drew these beautiful pictures of birds on branches and mailed them to her. He was polite, and honestly, he just made her feel completely safe and understood.
Section 2. Confessing the crime, the crisis of doubt. Of course, living in a happy little bubble of ignoring reality can only last so long. Eventually, over coffee, Grace confesses her unconventional relationship to her best friend Sarah, and Sarah is absolutely floored. She immediately warns Grace that prisoners lie, and tells her Mark is probably just using her for money and a place to crash when he gets out. But more importantly, Sarah points out the massive elephant in the room. Grace doesn't even know what terrible thing Mark actually did to end up behind bars. Did he hurt somebody? Did he steal? This conversation plants a really painful weed of doubt right in Grace's mind.
Grace realizes Sarah is right. She has to know the truth. So she writes to ask him. But man, this kicked off a grueling waiting game. Day 1, the letter goes in the mail. 2 weeks drag by before his first reply even arrives. And then it took 3 agonizing weeks for Mark to finally answer her question about why he was in prison. For those 3 weeks, Grace is just sitting there in fear, wondering if she offended him, or worse, wondering if he really was some kind of monster.
Well, the letter finally shows up and Mark confesses. He was in for robbery. He admits he took a lot of money, explaining he made a massive mistake when he was young and stupid. But the crucial part here is that he swears he is not a violent man and that he never physically hurt anyone. Grace is left to process all this. I mean, stealing is definitely bad, but she realizes people make mistakes. She decides that this one crime doesn't make him an irredeemable person. Because she chose forgiveness, the relationship just blossomed, ultimately leading to this incredible proposal right through the mail. Mark told her she saved him, writing, "You are the light of my life. You saved me. Will you marry me?" Now, her brain is screaming that this is way too fast and way too dangerous, but her heart said yes. They actually went through with a legally binding paper marriage while he was still inside. Grace officially became Mrs. Miller. She had to deal with the whispers of judgmental neighbors calling her desperate, all while sleeping alone, just waiting for her husband to come home. Section 3. Release Day Realities. Beyond the Prison Walls. Okay, picture this.
A whole year passes painfully slowly through the winter snow and the summer heat until release day finally arrives. Grace puts on a blue dress, which is Mark's favorite color, and makes this nerve-wracking 3-hour drive to a cold, gray facility topped with razor wire. She's waiting anxiously at these heavy metal gates. When the buzzer finally sounds, Mark steps through those doors wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, carrying nothing but a small plastic bag with literally everything he owned in the world. The second he sees Grace, he drops the bag and sprints to her. He lifts her up in their very first real-world hug. She said he smelled like soap and old paper, and in that warm, real embrace, every single one of Grace's lingering fears just vanished.
Section 4. The Robin Hood Twist. Justice versus the Law.
But wait, because on the drive back to Grace's small apartment, Mark stops the car. He looks dead serious, and he reveals the missing piece of the puzzle, the real reason he committed that robbery all those years ago. Mark didn't rob a bank or a store out of greed. Turns out he was working for a powerful, incredibly corrupt boss who was actively cheating poor, vulnerable families out of their hard-earned money. Mark tried to do the right thing. He tried to go to the police, but because this boss was so wealthy and well-connected, the cops simply refused to listen.
So taking justice into his own hands, Mark basically becomes a modern-day Robin Hood. He literally stole the cash back from his corrupt boss, and then he went around slipping envelopes of that exact money under the doors of the families who had been cheated. He kept absolutely nothing for himself, zero. But the rich boss had expensive lawyers, and the judge declared that stealing is stealing, completely ignoring Mark's motives. Mark literally sacrificed his own freedom for justice, because the law doesn't always care about why you did it.
Hearing this, Grace is just completely floored. She realizes she didn't marry some weak thief. She married a remarkably brave man. When she tearfully asks him why on earth he let her believe he was just a common criminal for all those years, he simply says, "I didn't want to brag. I didn't want you to love me because I was a hero. I wanted you to love me for me." He wanted her to fall for the man who writes letters and draws birds, not a martyr. And right then and there in that parking lot, Mark pulled out the very first letter Grace ever sent him. It was completely worn out and fragile, proving he had carried her words in his pocket every single day for 3 years. That letter was his hope.
Section 5. A Second Chance. Building a Life Together.
Armed with that same hope, Mark faced his reintegration into society. Now, we all know finding work after prison is notoriously difficult, but Mark didn't give up for a second. First, he took a super humble, dirty job washing dishes, and he did it with a huge smile just to provide for them. Second, he slowly but surely won over the skeptics. Sarah came over for dinner incredibly nervous, but Mark poured her tea, told jokes, and just proved his kindness. And finally, he found his true purpose working at a local animal shelter. He was incredibly gentle with the dogs and cats, mainly because he intimately knew exactly what it felt like to be stuck in a cage, just waiting for someone to love him.
Fast forward a year, and they finally had a real wedding out in a park, with Sarah standing right there as the maid of honor in the sunshine, listening to the birds sing. Today, they live a simple but deeply happy life. And I love this detail. They still honor how they met by writing little letters to each other on sticky notes and leaving them on the fridge, even though they live in the exact same room now. It's just their special tradition.
So, what do we take away from all this? Grace's story leaves us with a pretty powerful question to reflect on. Are you judging people a little too quickly based on the cages they come from? This story is absolute proof that sometimes good people make bad choices for the right reasons. But more importantly, it shows us that stepping out of our own prisons of loneliness requires taking a brave, open-hearted chance on someone else. Grace took a huge risk on a total stranger, and it unlocked the door to a truly beautiful life. So ask yourself, where will you find your light, and are you brave enough to reach for it?